Good morning, everybody. This is Brian Morrell with Pictometry again. Thank you for coming back for another session. We're going to take a look at some of the more advanced features of things, talk about workspaces quite a bit. But before I begin, can you take a look at your... So if everybody could click on that raised hand in the GoToWebinar panel to make sure they can hear the audio, that would be terrific. So I see a couple of raised hands popping in. Perfect. Okay, everybody can hear me. Thank you. I'm just going to lower everybody's hands. Next, I also want to get a little bit more of an idea as far as what everybody might have had the chance to click and play between the first sessions that we did a couple of weeks ago and today. So I just got a couple of poll questions to gauge the audience on a couple of things here that I'm just going to go ahead and launch here. First one is just, have you had a chance to kind of click and play between now and then? Perfect. Thank you. So I saw a good portion of you did get a chance to kind of come in and practice from that first session. Most of you were not as much as you would have liked to, and that I certainly can understand. Before we get into any of the other topics that we're going to cover today, I just wanted to see if there were any topics that you definitely wanted me to kind of go over as a little bit of a review. So if you could go ahead and vote on that poll that I just launched, give me an idea. If I really need to kind of go backwards before I go forward, that would be helpful. Wow, surprisingly, nobody has voted for yes, please help. So I'm going to go ahead and close that poll now that most have voted, which means I don't need to launch the last one because it was kind of on what the topics were if people really wanted me to kind of go over some things again. So I'm going to go ahead and bring over my web browser. I'm going to be using Mozilla Firefox. And we're going to go ahead and log in and get started. Before I log in, I do want to also point out that in the handout section of the GoToWebinar panel is that quick reference guide, and I mentioned that in both of the first sessions that we did. So if you didn't get a chance to go ahead and grab that, you can do that. The URL for that web address that I'm showing is right on that document as well, that PDF. And there's also a questions or chat box, so please feel free to type in any questions that you have along the way. I'm going to reserve to the end to kind of cover those. So I may end up answering your questions as we go. Now I'm going to go ahead and log in. Just as a quick reminder from this login page, there is the ability to manage your own passwords, forgot password and change password, as well as a link here to our YouTube channel where there's a bunch of videos for additional training options. So now I'm going to click CONNECTExplorer and go ahead and log in. So in the first sessions, I covered the navigational aspects up in the top left-hand corner, the image selections in terms of what you're looking at in your image window from the map type, the historical imagery, access to all the other images down in your bottom left-hand corner. In the bottom right-hand corner was the option for dual pane. So I could view things and do that change analysis and comparison and contrast, as well as export, that little arrow to the right from the box there. And then up in the top right-hand corner is where we really spent most of our time. And we interacted with a lot of your GIS data or mapping data. Just as a quick review, we spent a lot of time in tools. And I showed the basic functionality of any of the tools. There's a single left mouse click to drop a point. And I can continue to add points. and then a double left mouse click to end my measurement, and I can go ahead and pin that measurement. As we make these measurements and annotations, and these annotation tools just below it are going to function the exact same way. The only difference, there isn't a measurement value that's going to be attached with them, but they're going to function the exact same way. And as I start to make these, I might have the need to come back and edit a couple of things, okay? So when I click on the select tool, I can actually select any measurement or even the measurement result value to go ahead and change that measurement or annotation in any way that I want. The select tool, I just clicked on this measurement value box and I get this white box and blue crosshair. If I left mouse click on that, I can hold my left mouse button down and drag that and drop it wherever I want. And then when I'm done, I just kind of click away. So that select tool is key to moving that measurement value result, okay? Some of the other things you can do with editing also involve clicking on the measurement itself. And this same white box and blue crosshair is going to be the ability to move it, but I also have these orange dots, which I can left mouse click and hold on those, and I can actually edit my entire measurement. And while I'm in this editing phase, I can come down here to just below my tools and the corresponding tool units, and I could change my units of measure. I could change the color of the line, and I can change its thickness and then its opacity as far as how transparent or not it is. So I can kind of make it look pretty essentially. And you can do that with any of these measurements or annotations, okay? Then when I'm done, I just simply left mouse click away from it, and I've edited that measurement, and it's recalculated my value for me. So I'm going to open up this Workspaces tab. You'll notice that my distance measurement in yards is also over here. And I talked about a little bit in the first session that from this Options tab, you have the ability to save and come back to work, which is why it says New, Open, Save, Save As. Very similar to your Microsoft Office products. So I've already saved a project, and I'm going to go ahead and open that up. Since I didn't save this where I made that brief distance measurement, it's going to give me that notification. And if I wanted to save it, I'm going to actually have to click cancel and go back and then save it. In this case, I don't want to save this distance measurement, so I'm just going to go to open, click OK because I don't want to save it. And it's going to pull up my list of saved things. In this case, here's a fundraiser that I started to mark up. And this might be some of the reason. This is a very generic example of, say, a festival that I'm doing a lot of pre-event planning or even post-event markup. And that's going to change based on your role within the county or city that you represent. Many fire, police, public safety folks, they do a lot of pre-event planning and post-event markup for things. But at the same time, I've heard of various other departments within city and county governments that can utilize workspaces for a variety of things. And I have some pre-canned examples here that I'm going to pull up in another account of mine here. But before I get to that, because I want to show you the completed examples, ultimately, my goal is I've shown you how to use measurement and annotations tools. And then from that, you can save it, come back into it, but what would be the end result? So I kind of want to try to help connect the dots on what that end result is going to be. But before I do that, there's some other functionality within Workspaces that I kind of want to cover. And as you might see here in the column in my Workspace tab, all I've done is draw these different shapes with my shape annotation tool for where restrooms or porta potties might be, a stage for the festival, the food vendors where they're going to set up and where parking's going to be, and dropped a couple of markers where police cars might block off traffic. There's a couple more up here as well. Pretty much everything that's on here, and actually, yeah, everything that's on here is from the annotation section, okay? But if you look at the column, it says shape, 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 marker, 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 shape. So ultimately, as you were to save this, maybe come back to it later, you're going to need to create some organization to it. It's very kind of bland right now. And as you get a little bit more complex, that's going to be definitely more and more important, okay? So some of the functionality within this workspace column is I can right mouse click on something, and I have this ability to edit the name. In this case, this is for the parking area. So I'm going to change the name. And now it says parking area over here in my column. And you'll see when I clicked on that, I also got the ability to edit from this shape that I drew for the parking area. So that's another way, rather than using the select tool, another way to kind of enter that editing phase, if you will, is just simply by clicking on it from the workspace column. If I right mouse click on it again, I have some other options here. There's adding the tag, edit details, go to. In this case, all of my annotations are within really the same general viewing area, but realistically what you could be marking up could be spread out over the whole city or the county. So they're all hyperlinked to the imagery. And if you wanted to go to a particular one, you could just select it from the list and go to it. I can delete individual ones. If there was a measurement label, I can either hide or show it. And then there's an update image link. That's really going to be a lot more helpful with markers. And I have a pre-canned example to kind of show you those image links that you can set up to things, okay? So I've started to add the parking area. This next shape that I clicked on, let's just go to it, since I was kind of away from it, is the stage. So I'm going to edit the name of this as well too. I'm just simply adding some structure to things. So now I know what those two different shapes are. Okay. You can also, if you want to edit the name of multiple things at the same time, if I hold Control down on my keyboard, all these markers, oops, actually I don't want the stage selected. So we'll just start over there. These were all police cars. And there you'll see I've changed the name of all those at the same time. So that's just some functionality if you didn't want to go through one individually. And as you start to work on a project, it can get pretty complicated over there on the left-hand side. So changing the name definitely helps with adding some structure. There's another aspect that helps with adding some structure as well too. So I'm going to go back to the parking area at the top here. And there's this feature of tagging. I've seen tags used a couple of different ways. The first way I'm going to talk about tags is really kind of grouping like items together. So when I first click a tag, I'm simply going to type in parking and click apply. I also have some text associated with it. So I'm going to add that same tag to parking, to the text of parking. And when I've done that, now you'll see just below them in my workspace column, I get some lower font size text, and it's italicized, indicating the tag that I've put there. The reason tagging can be helpful is because you can have one big project and very, very often many subcomponents to that. So by tagging like items, you're kind of grouping those subcomponents together, okay? One of the examples I am going to pull up here as well, one of the complete examples, I've gone through and I've tagged a lot of different things, and hopefully you'll see that as well and how it can make sense, but really it can be most helpful the more complex the workspace. The other area that I've seen tags used is really kind of like a notation field. So you're not going to group similar things, but you're just going to quickly type a note about that measurement, annotation, or marker, and maybe some information kind of behind it as well. So that's what tagging is. There's some other options. Like if I go to the stage here and click on edit details, that I get for every single thing. I can add descriptions and I can kind of make a note within there. But where those edit details is really going to be helpful is going to be on the markers. When I click edit details, I get a lot more options. I can certainly add a tag to markers just like I would anything else. I can type a description, but what's really neat is I also have the ability to add in published web links as well as image links, and I can kind of copy and paste that information in there. And there's a couple of cool examples that I've seen these link URLs be utilized for that I'm going to talk to. So I'm going to go ahead and open up some pre-created examples that I have, and I'm just going to log into another account of mine and drag it over here in a different browser. Because I have a bunch of different examples for various departments within a county or city government that may speak to some of you that are on here today. So I'm going to click my Workspaces tab, and I'm going to go to my Options section, and I'm going to open some up. First, I'm going to go all the way to the bottom. And here's an example used by maybe a public works department or transportation department where they have the data, the volume of cars through here, and they want to change the street configuration, add in a turn bay because of how it gets backed up during rush hour in the morning or the afternoon. But it's pretty simple. All that I have here is a line to indicate how the road is going to change shape. I use the shape tool to create this arrow, and I put some text that says proposed turn bay. There really isn't much going on in my workspace, okay? But in this case, I probably would have exported it as a image file type, added it to my PowerPoint presentation to kind of back up the information that I have and go ahead and try to get this proposed turn bay added for capital dollars, things like that nature. Additionally, similar to this, whether it be public works or transportation sort of a realm internally, I've heard of folks using the idea of workspaces and the different annotation tools and markers to kind of block out how they're going to close down roads for road improvement projects throughout the course of the year. So maybe you're going to go down a 3-mile stretch and it's going to be completely repaved, and that's going to be in different stages. You can add tags for those different stages if you wanted as well, possibly, or create a separate workspace for each stage. So that's just another idea for that same department internally. Now I'm going to go to an example of something for our public safety officers. Quite often they're doing a lot of situational awareness, and this is something where they've used the imagery, marked it up, put some basic information there before they maybe go ahead and execute a raid or a search warrant on the house. And many of the information over on the right-hand side that's listed here, much of it is pretty much public information. Maybe some of it was also gathered by doing a couple of drive-bys, possibly, but there's not a lot going on in my workspace column either. But what's important is I was able to use the imagery and kind of identify some possible things. Now these eyeballs over here in my workspace column, you can simply turn on or turn off something. So I click on that eyeball and that shape outlining the deck that I did is going to disappear. But what I found in kind of evaluating this property is because of when this image was taken, there's a lot of shadow there that's kind of blocking, geez, what's underneath that deck? Is it a storage cache? Is it, where they're hiding their meth lab, what have you? Who knows? It could be a possible threat, okay? Which is why it was nice to go ahead and view the imagery and see what's behind it first. Additionally, you can kind of see there's a chain link fence here in front of all those arborvitae trees, and I found a gap there. So that tells me that's where the gate is. So people are inherently creatures of habit. So if the police were going to go and execute a search warrant on this property, they might want to station a couple of folks kind of out back here, because people being creatures of habit, they're going to know where that direct access is to go through the chain link fence and try to go through the path of least resistance as well. So I would, as a precaution, put somebody back there. That's just an example of how, looking at it and using the imagery, I've been able to ascertain and find out more information about the property before actually going there. So that's just an example how public safety folks could use it. Now, this is really an example where I've used dual pane before, and this is really for anybody who goes out and does field work, whether it be planning, zoning, or assessment. What I did in this example is I utilized dual pane, and I outlined, if I zoom out a little bit, I outlined a neighborhood that I want to kind of target, and found different things when I did that comparison and contrast in between 2 different years, and I set those panes up. And what I found was the changes that I at least wanted to give a drive-by or walk through or try to find out if the homeowner's there, that sort of stuff. I wanted to get some more information. Here, when I compared and contrasted the imagery, I found, they had a new fence, so I took a perimeter measurement of that. And then, you see, I highlighted a code violation that I found. So the code violation actually occurs on both sides of the house. And where I live, this is in the county that I live in, so I understand the codes could be a little bit different there, but I have a fence, I have a dog, so I know the code from having gotten my fence done the proper way. I had a permit for it, and I had it inspected. For me, I can only have a fence as far forward as this rear foundation line that I also kind of drew across the middle. So this tells me that, they might not have gotten a permit for it. They definitely never had it inspected. And does it even face the right way? Because many of you, like myself, probably have driven down the side of the road and you've seen somebody whose privacy fence has the support posts or the bracing facing on the outside rather than the nice side looking out as a common courtesy to your neighbor. Now I want to open up one that, whoops, wrong one. One that takes into account a little bit more of tagging, okay? And this is going to be a very rudimentary evacuation plan. And so I dropped flags at every door, created the zone, and kind of drew routes to that zone. But if you look at my left-hand column, you'll see I've changed the name of everything. I've also added a tag to every single item. So this now gets back into a little bit more functionality within workspaces. If you take the time to add those tags and change those names and make some more structure in your workspace based on what it is you're doing, you'll see if I scroll my bar down, there's quite a bit in here, and I could probably have added a few more things as well. But at the top here, you'll have this idea of grouping and filter, okay? This is where tagging can be really helpful when it's grouping of like items rather than adding a note. So everything that's group up here refers to what is in my column, and everything that's filter refers to what's being displayed on my image window. So when I click that arrow, you'll see I can group things by tag, by name, or by type. Right now it's defaulted to none, and that just means everything that I put in my workspace on the column is going to show up in the order in which I make it. But I might want to make sense of it later on and put some structure to it. And so that's where the tagging and the renaming can be helpful. But if I go by type, I'm going to have all my lines, all my text, all my markers, all my distance measurements kind of grouped together. That may or may not be the best way to organize it based on what you're doing. By name, if I did that, I'll have all my entry exits, all my mobile command, all my roadblocks, all my routes. Even though if I look at my routes, some go to evac zone 1, some go to 2, some go to 3. Might not be the best way to organize this. This is where group by tag could be helpful. So now that I've clicked and done that, you'll see I have all the components related to each evacuation zone, each evacuation zone being a subcomponent of the whole evacuation plan. And so I have zone 1, zone 2, zone 3, medical, mobile command, the roadblocks. And all it's done is created some structure to my workspace. Very similarly, filtering does the exact same thing. And when I group by tag over here, I select the tag, and all I need to do is maybe come in and edit just a little bit of zone 2. So based on how complex you've marked something up based on the project you were working on, maybe you just want to edit one small portion of it and kind of take out the noise and just look at that one piece of things. And that's then all I have here. I didn't lose everything else. I just need to come back to the top and change my filter to none, and it's still all right there. Okay, I just kind of minimized what was going on for a little bit so I could focus on one small portion of things, make changes to it, add just to that one aspect of the project. Now there's one last one that I want to pull up, and this goes back to where I started showing you the idea of adding in image links or web links to the different markers, okay? So this one is titled Homeless, as you see in the top. The idea came from another county that I was training in, and while I was training on site and teaching class, I had a couple of public safety officers that were trying to map the homeless. And it wasn't because they have a problem with them as far as them being too many. Well, there were a lot in this county, but it was more for when you're responding for 911 or emergency services to a homeless person, where do you dispatch them to? And certain people tend to gravitate to certain areas, whether it was Camp 1 or Tent 4. They knew them because they were always out in the field and on the ground with them, that they wanted to kind of put some of the information they've gathered and collected about some of those people and put a marker down for them. And when I click on one of those markers, I've added some information about John Smith. He's been living underneath that bridge since a date or what have you. Or here is a web link. So I just opened up a new browser tab, and this went to another training site of ours. And then there's a picture of myself there. I couldn't pull up anybody else, really. Didn't want to embarrass people here. So I got to that by right-clicking, and it'll say add details, and this is where I went and I put in that web link as well as the image link in order for when I click on that marker, I get all that information. Now, one of the things I've found interesting, if I click on edit details, this link URL, that is a public-facing link that I've used. It's a public-facing website that anybody can go to and access. But I've had a lot of questions about it recently, and I found out some interesting ways that different people are doing things. They're using these markers and that link URL to also share information. That link URL could be a link to a Dropbox or another cloud-based document sharing service. And then you can go ahead and get access to that information through it. Been a terrific way to share information between cities and counties or municipalities that I found within a few of the other places that I've gone and trained. Additionally, now I haven't seen this example hypothetically, but I've been told that somebody has gone ahead and done this, where basically that link URL is a live camera feed for their security cameras, which are on their internal network. And so if an alarm goes off, they can click on the link for where that camera is and get it to open up in a new browser tab, and they can see the live video feed of it. So there's a couple of unique ways you can do that. I've also heard of somebody that they're going to try to take some drone footage for emergency service responses and upload it to YouTube, and then put that YouTube link here, and so that they have that same footage for that incident all kind of in a workspace and saved with those markers. So anything that can have a web-based link to it can go in there as well. So those can definitely go a variety of different ways and be helpful for you. So now I'm going to go ahead and close out this example here and all those other examples. And I'm going to go back to the Solano County fundraiser example that I started to pull up. Hopefully you found some of those completed or in progress examples helpful based on your individual roles within the city or the county or entity that you represent and work for. There's a couple other things related to workspaces that I also want to show once you've kind of maybe taken the time to save something, no matter how big or small it may be. So I'm going to gravitate up here to this options tab. And now once I've saved everything like I have here, I get these other options down here to no longer be kind of grayed out. So there's a couple of things here. There's a share, an export, and an export KML. So first I'm going to go to sharing. Now here you'll see I popped up a little window and I have pretty much everybody that has an account. If by chance you don't see everybody, which could very well be the case, it doesn't mean you can't share to somebody whose name you don't see there. There is this email field with the word add next to it. And so you could type in somebody that you know has a pictometry account and what their email address associated to that account is. When you click add, you'll see them populate down below. And then you can give them one of the different sharing permissions. So in this case, I'm the author of this project. By default, everybody is denied access. If I want to share this to somebody, I can choose 3 other different permission levels. First, I'm going to go to the very last one, restricted. That is read only. I can share it to Aaron here that I've selected, and he can open it up and look at it, not save his own copy, just simply probably shoot me an email back saying, well, geez, this is awful. You need to go in and make some changes to it and let me know. Viewer. Now, this viewer has one other additional step in terms of permission level. I can share this to Aaron. He can then open it up, save his own copy, modify that copy, but not affect the integrity of the original that I've created. This is probably the best way to share stuff. In which case, a project like this fundraiser that Aaron and I are both working on together, I could share it to him. He could go in, make some changes, and share his version back to me with how he's fixed all my mistakes. Lastly, there's contributor access. This, I would definitely encourage the use of communication outside of pictometry based on what it is that you're doing to kind of, well, to really protect the integrity of what it is you've created. So as a contributor, if I shared this to Aaron, we would both have the same access to the same project and could both be logged in at the same time and both be making separate changes at the same time. However, if I logged off first and he logged off second, somebody's changes get lost. So to protect the integrity of the project where you both have same level access, like say, for example, that evacuation plan I pulled up, and you want to share that to the department chief or something, I would say send it to him as a contributor and shoot him an email saying, go ahead, take a look at this, make any changes. You have 2 weeks. Let me know when you're done. And then for those 2 weeks, I myself would just not log into that workspace or make any changes to it. Okay. So those are a couple of different permission levels that you can set, and you can give access to that exact same workspace that you've created and somebody else can kind of look at. So you can do some collaboration within the application as well, which is awesome. Now I'm also going to go ahead and I'm going to take a couple of quick area measurements here and just put them. I'm just kind of getting a rough outline of, let's say, the ball field here, because I want to show a couple of different things related to export. Okay. And I'll take a distance measurement. There we go. So I just wanted to get some measurement values, okay, because there's two different exports here. And the first one I want to show, I think is personally more helpful when you have some measurement values. So quite often, I know there's a lot of public works folks out there that spend a lot of time out in the field, and they have the stick with the wheel on the end of it, and they're going ahead and walking off and getting actual measurements of things to maybe determine how much material is needed for a project. So hypothetically here, let's just say Public Works is going to repave 10 different parking lots across the county in a couple of different cities, and they need to get an idea of the total square footage or for the volume of material. And we're just going to assume, say, a 3-inch depth of asphalt to order to repave that area, whether it's asphalt or concrete. But we need to get an idea for each of those parking lots for the length and the width, or if it's oddly shaped, whatever the polygon is going to be. So rather than get in the car and walk all those off and add those together, then add your 3-inch depth for volume and get an idea of the total amount of material needed to place your order with the supplier, you could come in here, use the area tool, make a measurement on all of those parking lots individually. They'll appear in your workspace column, and then come into export. This is going to be a CSV export of everything that's in my workspace. So it pulled up over here on my other monitor. I'm just going to drag it over. You'll see here's my parking shape, police markers with a lat long. But the reason I think this is a lot more helpful when you have values in here, in that example where I went and I measured the square footage of all those parking lots, there's my value. And if I had 10 of those, I could then come in here and say equals the sum of all those columns, and then I have my total, multiply that total by that 3-inch height, and I have my total volume of asphalt or concrete needed to repave those parking lots. I did it in a lot less time rather than going out into the field and braving the traffic. So that's a export functionality of everything in your workspace. Additionally, there's another export functionality that I want to show, and this one says export KML. Many of you may or may not know what KML means, but some of you probably already utilize Google Earth. Well, just like Microsoft Excel, the file format for that at the end is .xl or XSLS, something along those lines, or PowerPoint is .pptx. They all have their own file type, and KML is the file type that Google Earth reads. So when I click Export KML, all I'm going to do is really open up Google Earth, and I'm going to view this fundraising project just in a different medium. Now Google Earth is opening up here on my other machine, so I'm just going to, or my other window actually, I'm just going to drag it over here for everybody. And it's going to take me right to this fundraising project. And all those shapes that I made. And I'm just viewing that in a different medium. Now, one of the things I found that's, now there must not be a ton of imagery. There we go. It was taking a while to load. So there it is in Google Earth. Now, one of the things that's actually pretty cool, these links, you saw me click on one of those that was on that map, and it opened up a web browser. And I kind of clicked back on it quickly. But when I was talking about how you can add links to some of those markers, whether they're image links or really web links, like say you're sharing some PDFs to people for a location and they were to a Dropbox account, those web links come over and they're still active in Google Earth. So it's another good way to kind of maybe pass some information along too. So that's some of the idea behind workspaces. Now, I'm going to close workspaces, and I'm going to move on from that. But there really isn't a ton of things left for me to cover. It's really kind of wrapping up some things that I briefly touched on in the first section of the webinars that I gave in the first series, and showing you some things that I didn't get a chance to talk about. So I'm going to close my workspace panel, and I'm going to come up to my Identify tool. I talked about Identify with point, box, and line, but there's a couple of other things that I want to show here. One, it says there's a buffer. This was a feature a couple months ago that was recently added that was brought to us by a lot of public safety users. And the situation they presented to us is if there's an incident at a location and I need to evacuate people, how can I determine who those people are? So in this case, I'm going to type in 500. I'm just going to kind of pan away from our fundraiser here into the neighborhood. And let's just say there was an incident right here, and I click on that spot on the imagery where that incident would be. Whether I'm in a point, a box, or a line, it's going to add a 500-foot buffer from where I draw that. So as you might be able to see here, there's a much bigger circle rather than that small little point. What I've done is I've dropped a 500-foot radius circle. I'm going to zoom out a little bit. And so there's my 500-foot circle. And if I go to the parcel information, there's all those parcels and everybody whose address may be in there. And there are addresses there, partial address. So I could come back in and I could go to my options, export the results. And now I have all those addresses that need to be evacuated. Just pulling up your same data that's already in here, okay? I would encourage you, if you're going to use the buffer tool, to maybe get in the habit of coming back and setting it back to 0, only because it will remember it. And the next time you go to use it, you might not want to drop a 500-foot circle. It might just be an individual point based on what that data is that you're looking to retrieve with the Identify tool. The other aspects related to Identify that I didn't get a chance to talk about in the first section is this all layers right below that. So you'll see when I got results on that 500-foot circle, I got results from many different mapping data sets. This all layers lets me choose exactly the information that I want. In this case, I just selected 2 of them, and now it says custom 2. And it's going to remember that, just like a lot of the things in preferences that I'm going to go back to again here shortly. It's going to remember that if you log out and then log back in 2 weeks from now. It'll remember those same 2. Maybe you have access to 10 different data sets, but you really only want the information from 3 or 4 on a consistent basis. So you can kind of take away some of that excess information that you may be getting with the Identify tool. Now I'm going to go back into the silhouette of the person at the top here and go to my preferences, and these are my individual account settings. There's a couple of things here right at the top that I want to talk about. Measurements. So when we went through measurements, and I kind of readdressed it a little bit here this morning, I mentioned it was a left mouse click to drop a point and a double mouse click to end the measurement. And then you get this little measurement value box, and you got to pin that. You got to click that push pin, or I can click it again to remove it. But I can click pin measurements by default. And now when I go and make a measurement, my little measurement value box is automatically pinned. I didn't have to go and click that push pin. So that's one. If I was a avid user, I would go ahead and set that myself personally. I'm going to go back into preferences because there was another feature right below it that I wanted to talk about. And this says show side segment lengths. Now I'm going to click save. And if you want to show the side segment lengths, I'm going to encourage you to actually have pin by default on as well. So have both those together. Let me clear my Identify results here. Options, clear all. I'm going to zoom in a little bit. Go back and use my area tool. Now in the first sessions, I also demonstrated taking an area measurement. And if I simply go ahead and grab a quick area measurement on this structure, or the roof line of the structure rather, it's pinned by default, and I got what each side segment was. So that can be some helpful information for you that's what you're looking for. Those are just a couple of the additional preferences that I would encourage all of you to go in and take a look at and make sure you have them set how you want them. There's also some individual preferences for contour lines. Now, contour lines is up underneath your layers and your stack of papers, but maybe you want them to display differently. It all depends on if you work with elevation data or not. And I could just simply turn contours on. And I'm going to get some of my elevation lines, those break lines, drawn there, and you can have those be drawn a little bit differently if you want. So that's what that functionality is for. Now, lastly, before I go and kind of take some questions to things, I also want to show one other aspect that I don't know if you were aware of, but I also want to make everybody aware of it, is the fact that your same email address and password is going to work with our mobile app. And so I just brought over the mobile app here, and I'm going to log in under a different account, so that way I can stay logged in under the Solano County account that I'm using in order to answer any questions that may come up. So if you go to your respective Google Play or Android store, or App Store for iOS, I mean Google Play for Android, it's a free download. Your same email address and password will get you in. And it's very, very similar to some of the things that we've already kind of covered in the web-based application, but really kind of stripped down a little bit, okay? So I have a menu tab. It's those three lines. I have these directional arrows. When I touch those, I'm going to be able to click and rotate. That square at the bottom that I just clicked on is going to take me to my ortho view. Pinch to zoom. If I pull my fingers together, it's going to zoom me out. If I pull them apart, it's going to zoom me in. And I have a search bar up in the top right, or in the top middle, and that says address search. That's that Bing third-party search that I talked about in the first session. But maybe you want to search off something else. So you can change that just like you did. I can go to configure search. I want to search off that parcel layer, and I want to type in that parcel number or that APN number, and I can go ahead and search off of that just like I was used to. There's different tools, but there's a couple things I want to point out here in the tool section. There's a lot less of them, and then identify is actually it's a separate tool underneath tools. It doesn't have its own icon separated out like it did in the browser-based application of things. I'm just going to pull up a distance tool measurement here because the functionality is a little bit different because it's a touch screen instead of using a mouse. Down in your bottom, right down here, you'll see there's add point and measure, and I can simply touch those, and where I have that crosshair, I can continue to kind of move that with my finger as I'm dragging it along the screen, and then I get my result. Now, one of the limitations within the mobile app, I can only have one measurement value display on the screen at a time. Unlike in the browser, I've seen some people accumulate 200-300 different measurements or annotations in their workspace column and save it and go back to it later. When I'm done with that measurement, there's a done button down in your bottom right-hand corner. Image filter. Maybe I want to look at some of that historical imagery. Apparently where I am, the most recent is only 2007, and that's fine. I can also turn on any visual layers that I want to see. Maybe I want to see the parcel lines. I also have the option to export the image, so I can use the device myself, whether it's an Android device or an Apple device, and I can even email the image, and it'll start to populate that email for me with whatever was on my image window. If there was any measurements or layers turned on, it's going to send it just like that. So that's just another useful resource for you that you already have access to, and it's a free download. Up in your top left-hand corner, though, for any of you that are with me this morning that maybe do some field work and do some of that comparison and contrasting, well, since we captured this imagery, there's been some change that's happened in certain areas. So on either a tablet or a mobile phone and a good wireless access to things, you can actually do some comparison and contrasting from when we captured the imagery to now. So this top left-hand corner, there's an arrow that points to northwest, and when I touch that, this is actually a geolocator button where it reads the GPS on my device and it pulls up an image for the location that I am at. And this is actually where I am here in Rochester, New York. This was when our building about a year and a half ago that I'm in now was under construction as we moved because we outgrew the size of our previous one. So this is a way for you to pull up an image for where you are at out in the field and kind of do some of that comparison and contrasting. So hopefully seeing some access to the mobile app, knowing that you now have access to it was also helpful as well. Now I'm going to go ahead and take a look here at what we have for questions and go ahead and answer some of the questions. So I see one here. Can you add or delete vertices? So you can definitely add vertices. If I go to my measurements with my distance tool here, when I come in to edit something, oops, let me turn those off here. I pinned by default inside segment length, and I kind of made that distance measurement a little short here, so I'm going to go right across the top here. And it pinned it. When I go to edit that measurement, so I use select and I click on it, any line segment of a measurement or an annotation, you're always going to get a vertice at each end. You're always going to get one in the middle. So you can add vertices, but you got to kind of move one of them in order to get some of those other points here. Okay. So as you see, as I move one of those, I keep getting another one in the middle. So that's a way to add vertices. As far as deleting them, I don't know if once I've straightened them out like they were, where this was only 2, it's probably not a perfect line anymore or a straight line anymore. I can't actually delete any. So I could see where it could be nice to come in and right click on one of those and delete that individual vertice. But no, that's a great question. You can add them by editing the measurement, but there isn't a way to delete them. The best way I would suggest is maybe delete the entire measurement or annotation and start over again. So there's another question in here about how accurate are the measurements. So that's a great question. And that's going to have a lot of variability. And I'm going to speak to 2 different things regarding that variability. So in those first sessions that I conducted a couple weeks ago, I mentioned that Solano County had imagery at 2 different resolutions. One was a 3-inch resolution, which gave me a lot of good detail. And then at a higher elevation, there was also an 8-inch, okay? So there's going to be some variability simply based off what imagery am I looking at, okay? We know that each pixel is 3 inches at that better resolution, and we know that each pixel is 8 inches of ground distance at that higher altitude that we captured. So there's going to be some variability just based off the image that I'm on, as well as from the user. So you and I can both click on different pixels. They could be right near each other, but it's going to account for some of the change in the values that we're going to get. So based on what you may need the measurement value for, it may be a replacement to doing stuff in the field, and it may not be. It depends on how accurate you need to be. Now, there's been some studies that have been done, some independent studies by some universities. I know one that I read a while back from Stephen F. Austin University in Texas that was about measuring the height of street poles. I'm not going to arbitrarily just throw out a number that they're 95% accurate, because there is a variability between the user as well, and in different places we're going to capture different level imagery for. So I'm going to let you kind of use your best judgment on that for what you may need the most accurate measurement for, but I would implore you to test it and see, go out in the field, make some measurements, and come in here and make some measurement. How close are you? And you'll get an idea as to where you may be able to substitute some of that time in the field for it. So hopefully that helps answer your question regarding the accuracy of the measurements. That's a great question. So another one that came in here, are there specific social media sites for linking images or videos, i.e. Twitter, Instagram, or Shutterfly? So to my knowledge, that link works for any web link, okay? It doesn't matter if it's a social media account or if it's you're going to ESPN or you're going to CNN or something along those lines. My understanding and from the testing I've done, it'll work on any public-facing web link. And then I do know of some people who have actually had some success in creating some internal web links. And when you're VPN'd in, it has worked for them as well. And then when you're not VPN'd in, it hasn't worked for them. So another question in here is, can you buffer around the shape of a parcel? Great question. So let me come up here to my layers, and I'm going to turn on my parcel lines. And this question is really getting at creating a 500-foot buffer around this entire polygon. The way I would suggest in doing that, I would go to your ortho perspective to get the most accurate representation of how that mapping data is created and shown. And I would come into identify by line and type in your 500-foot buffer, and I would actually trace this parcel line as accurately as possible. You can't identify off a layer that's in here, so this would be the best that I would come up as a workaround. Now when I zoom out, it shouldn't be a perfect circle because of it was a rectangle in here, or a polygon really. It's not a perfect line there at the top of it, but let me zoom out a little bit so we can see that whole shape. Well, it is a circle. But that's just one way I've seen people use it before. It doesn't work exactly like what you're asking, and we have had that as a feature request before. That's a great thing to request. I would encourage you to come up here under your account information in the top right-hand corner, and there's this whole feedback section. I would encourage any of you, if there's some functionality you're looking at, to come in here and type in some functionality that you're looking for, some bugs that you may have experienced as well. This feedback button right from within the application goes directly to our engineering team and also helps us kind of prioritize different things as well, as far as what we're going to add or what we may need to make better, that sort of thing. So the last question in here is about, can you locate your current location on the mobile app? Hopefully you saw me do that with that GPS locator icon in the mobile app. It doesn't actually place a pin for where you're at, but it pulls up an image for where you're at. So it isn't like some, like when you go to Google Maps or something and you type in an address and it drops a pin on it. It's not really looking at it from that aspect of things. It's just trying to pull up an image for where you're at and view it. So it gets you close, maybe not as specific as you were looking for, sort of thing. So hopefully you've all found that this helpful to kind of go through some workspaces and what you can do with them a little bit more in detail, some of the options in regards to sharing and exporting the data. Hopefully you all saw the mobile app as being a tool that you can also utilize and not just access to the imagery through a web-based browser. That really is going to conclude things for this morning. I have recorded this session as well, and we'll make it available to the administrators so they can post up on a local or a commonly accessible resource for everybody, including those that may not have had a chance to sit in today. But I'm just going to kind of take a quick little pause here, and if you have any more questions, feel free to go ahead and type those in. And then if none start to kind of populate in here, I'm just going to go ahead and end the webinar for everybody. But thank you for your time.